Hey everyone, Haley here from The Foiled Plan. I'm so excited because today is Halloween. That's right, it's spooky season, the most wonderful time of the year. I got the puns. One might say I'm hilarious. Okay, I'm done. What better way to celebrate Halloween than with a candy corn inspired glitter tumbler? Let's do it! Alright, so to get started, we want to protect our space from the epoxy, so I'm going to lay down my large silicone crafting mat from ShopAuntieTay.com, and then I also like to use a smaller silicone mat that's just from Dollarama. It's actually a glue gun mat, but I use it for this as well. I'll explain why in a little bit. And then to protect myself from the epoxy, I'm going to use my mask and my gloves. Then I just go ahead and put my mask on as well as my gloves, and I'm ready to start the process. When I'm working with my We Are Memory Keepers SpinIt, I like to first make sure that the arm is securely attached. So you want to make sure that on the far end the lock is fully secure, and then also adjust the side that's closest to the actual motor, just to make sure that the size is going to fit okay. I'm also going to be using my Recollections heat gun today, and I'm just using a coffee cup from the Dollar Tree, and I've prepped my surface with a little bit of sandpaper and then a fresh coat of white spray paint. And then once that dried, I stuck it onto my SpinIt and just made sure that it was sitting level. Now, I do also recommend having some form of tape, I'm using electrical tape for this, around the top of the cup before you start spray painting it, and then just leave it on until after you're done the epoxying, because it's going to keep the screw top of the cup itself from getting anything on it. Now today, to mix my epoxy in, I'm going to use my silicone measuring cup from ShopAuntieTay.com. The glitter that I'm using is the yellow, which is Bookworm from Auntie Tay, Rosetta, which is this really pretty orange color, and then I'm also using the Recollections Snow Fine Glitter. That's going to be the white. So I chose these colors because they remind me of candy corns, and I just love the color combinations together. Now I also have my 2-part epoxy resin, and for this I am using the Envirotex Light brand, but you can use your favorite brand. And then I also like to have paper towels nearby. So to get started with the epoxy mixing, I'm going to take part 1, which is the resin, and I'm going to put about 10 milliliters into the mixing cup, and then once I have that in, I'm going to switch over to my part 2, which is the hardener, and I'm going to put in another 10 milliliters because the epoxy resin works on a 1-to-1 ratio, which just means that if you have one portion of resin, you want the same amount of hardener. So I'm using 10 milliliters of resin, I'm going to use 10 milliliters of hardener. Also, feel free to pour your resin and hardener into separate cups to make sure you have the correct amount, and then combine them into one cup. It's completely up to you. I just choose to do it this way because I find it saves a little bit of time and also materials, because I'm just doing it in one place. I don't have to use multiple cups. Then I'm going to take my popsicle stick and I'm going to slowly mix the resin and hardener together. Now, it looks like I'm mixing fairly quickly in this video, but it's just because I have it sped up. You want to make sure you're mixing nice and slowly so that you don't get lots of air bubbles. The quicker you are mixing, the more air bubbles you're going to get, and in the end, that's not going to be great for your final product. Now, we will end up with some air bubbles regardless, and that's okay. We can also get those air bubbles out by using a heat gun on the cup itself once we pour the epoxy on the cup. So I'll show you that in a moment. But now that we've got it mixed, we're gonna turn the SpinIt on so the cup starts to turn. It doesn't need to be on a very fast speed. And then I like to use one hand to apply the epoxy with my finger. A lot of people do this a lot of different ways, so just figure out what you find comfortable and just run with that. So the reason I like to use just one hand is so that if I need to touch something else in the process, I can simply use my left hand because I didn't touch any epoxy, so it's completely dry. So just make sure that you are covering the entire cup. Don't forget the bottom, especially if there's little ridges and whatnot on the bottom of the cup, like this cup has. So I'm also just taking my fingers and moving them back and forth once I've got the whole cup coated, just to make sure I've got a nice thin even layer for my first coat of epoxy. Once I am happy with the way this is all sitting on my cup, I want to get out some of those nasty air bubbles that may still be lingering in the epoxy. So this is when I'm gonna grab my heat gun with my hand that has no epoxy on it. I'm gonna turn it on and just let it warm up a little bit, and I'm gonna move it back and forth. You wanna make sure you're not staying in one spot for too long because you'll end up burning your epoxy. And you're just gonna move it about slowly, not slowly, you wanna move it about fairly quickly actually. And then you'll get those air bubbles out. You'll see them slowly start to pop all over the cup as you do this process. Once you're happy with how this is looking, you can turn off your heat gun and set it to the side. Then we are ready to start the fun part, which is adding the glitter. So I mentioned before that I like to use this mini silicone mat on top of the large silicone mat, and that's because when I add the epoxy, sometimes the epoxy drips down and hits the mat, and then if I go to apply my glitter, I usually like to use a piece of paper underneath my cup to catch the fallout. And if I set that paper right on top of a silicone mat that has epoxy drips on it, then immediately the paper is contaminated and it's just not as easy to work with. So I pull that epoxy covered silicone mat out from underneath and I replace it with a piece of paper to catch my glitter fallout. Now I am starting with the orange color on the bottom. I know candy corns actually start with a yellow color as the bottom of the corn, I guess you would say. The kernel? I don't know. But I liked the orange being on the bottom for this cup. So I find that getting glitter on the bottom of the cup when it's spinning like this can actually be a little bit challenging. You kind of have to like fling it at the bottom of the cup. So if anyone actually has any advice for me to get the glitter on the bottom while using epoxy in this method, let me know, because I am always here to learn things as well. So I've just started the glitter process. I've got the first like ring of things done, and then I kind of remembered that I like to keep my SpinIt slightly tilted upwards so that I don't end up with like a thick ring of epoxy around the bottom of the cup. So I just take 2 thick popsicle sticks and I put them underneath the base of the SpinIt, and it sort of like tilts it up a little bit. I find that helpful. And then I just dump the excess orange glitter back into the container, and I'll set that paper aside because if I'm gonna add more orange glitter, I'll pull that paper back in the future. So I use a different sheet of paper for each type of glitter so that I don't end up getting orange glitter back in the yellow glitter when I go to dump it. And then I'm just gonna overlap the first orange color with the new yellow color that I'm using because I kind of want it to be a slight ombre effect. And with these types of bottles, they don't dump out super fast, which is nice. So I just kind of hold it over top, and you'll see I kind of tap the back or the bottom of the glitter container, and it pulls out or pushes out the perfect amount of glitter with each little tap. And then same process, I dump the excess back into the bottle because I am not about to waste this glorious glitter. Now we're ready to move on to the white glitter after I apparently add some more orange. So with ombre, you kind of have to build and build and build so you don't get really harsh lines, so that's probably why I did this. But now I've used my new, oh wait, did I use my, oh yeah, I used my original white piece of paper for this, I believe. Yeah, we're good. Don't mind me, I'm just rambling over here. Okay, so I've got a new piece of white paper and I'm going to use the Recollections brand snow glitter, which is super pretty. And I'm just gonna do the same process, and I'm gonna move all the way to the top of the cup and move down into the yellow. Now, going from white to a bright color, or really any color, can be a little bit tricky to get a nice ombre look because white is almost clear depending on the type of glitter you're using. And yeah, it makes it a little bit more tricky to get a smooth wash rather than that harsh line. But we can do it. Now, once I am happy with my glitter, I'm gonna close everything up, clean up my space, and I'm gonna let my cup spin for about an hour. Then I'll come back to my cup and I'll remove the electrical tape from around the top so that the epoxy doesn't cure on top of the tape, which makes it quite challenging to remove and can potentially ruin your epoxy. Now, once my cup was done spinning for an hour and I removed the tape, you want to let it to sit and spin for another 7 hours on top of that. And I like to check mine about every hour, I would say, an hour, hour and a half, just to make sure everything is still looking okay. There's no like weird spots or the arm hasn't fallen off the machine, stuff like that. Now what you're seeing here, if you're wondering why you can see the black tape so clearly, is because I ended up doing a second layer of epoxy with more glitter. I just wanted to up that sparkliness factor. And so this is after my first hour of the cup spinning during my second coat of epoxy and glitter. So I'm removing that electrical tape nice and slowly, just being careful because it is still quite wet. And once I've got that off, I happened to notice that there was a little strange dent, I guess you could say, in my epoxy. Now, when I mix epoxy, I always make sure that I have a little bit more than I need, and I will just leave it sitting in the cup, and it sort of cures at the same rate as the epoxy while it's turning. So if you'll see what I'm doing here, I'm just using my popsicle stick. I take like a teeny little dollop of the epoxy that's curing at the exact same rate as the epoxy on the cup, and I'm just going to put that little dollop of epoxy in that little dent that I mentioned earlier, and it will, depending on how late in the game you've noticed your little mistake, it will sort of even itself out. Now, this is not going to work properly if you notice something is not right and then you decide to mix up a whole new batch of epoxy and then fill in the hole or fill in the dent, because that epoxy is going to be mixed, or curing, I mean, at a completely different rate. It's just not going to work. Take my word for it. Okay, so my cup has been spinning for 8 hours entirely, so I just come back and I lightly brush my finger across the cup, and I can tell that it's not 100% cured, but it's cured enough to be removed from the SpinIt, and I can just set it upright to finish. I usually like to leave my cups overnight just to make sure that they are fully cured before I add any sort of decal. Just be very careful when you are removing this, because if you end up squeezing the cup when it's not fully cured, it's going to end up with your fingerprints sort of engraved into the epoxy. But take a look at that ombre color. Man, I love this color combination so much. What do you guys think? Candy corn. Now, me personally, I don't like eating candy corn, but I like the colors. I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Do you guys like candy corns, or are you like me and you feel like it tastes like you're licking wallpaper? Let me know down below. Anyways, I set my cup aside and I just let it sit, typically overnight. Now that my cup is fully cured, I can go ahead and apply a decal to it, and then apply one final coat of epoxy on top of that just to seal it in and make sure it goes nowhere. But instead of doing that and showing you guys that in this video, I'm actually going to leave it blank because I'm going to post this glitter tumbler on my website for sale. And then if anyone is interested in purchasing this particular cup, then I will have a spot there where you can let me know how you would like it personalized. So if you want your name, if you want a cute little quote, basically anything, and I will get that customized for you and then shipped out to your door ASAP. So make sure you head over to thefoiledplan.com and take a look around for that. And I think this is actually going to be my first glitter tumbler that I will be posting on my website, so that's kind of exciting. Anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I had a lot of fun making this cup, and I was happy to share my process with you guys, and I hope you found it helpful. So, that's all I'm gonna say. Bye!